Welcome to the Productivity Podcast. This is number 3 in a series with our friends at REPL, and today we're going to be talking about scheduling. I'm delighted to be joined by Lucinda, Dana and Matt from REPL. Hi guys, how you doing?
Hey there, good, thanks.
Good.
Hi, good.
So we'll find out a bit more about you first before we jump into what scheduling is and how it works and some best practice tips and things to watch out for. So if we start with you, Lucinda, what have you been doing for REPL and how long have you been with the business?
So I've been with REPL for 10 years, doing implementations in retail and hospitality, and I'm a solution architect.
Brilliant. And Matt, I think you're based in America?
Yep, that's correct. I'm based in Denver, Colorado, and have been with REPL for almost exactly 3 years, doing the same as Lucinda, implementations for different retailers and WFM solutions.
Awesome. And finally, last but not least, Dana.
Hi, yes, I'm Dana from South Africa, and I have been with REPL for nearly a year, a couple of days short of a year. I've been doing scheduling and with the company for a year, but for 10 years experience in various different industries, retail, gaming, hospitality, healthcare.
We've got a wealth of experience on the call from all around the world, which is good. So we're touching on scheduling today as part of the series, and just to set the scene, by scheduling in the, I suppose, life cycle of workforce management, we've been out and measured our times and the activities or got process times in the labour standards, standard minute values we've talked about in the first of the series. We've then turned that into a workload demand and shaped that. So how many hours do we need by day, shaped across the time slots of the day, whether that be hours, half hours, 15 minutes. Now we come to a really important part of it, and part of the reason that people do it is we're going to start to schedule our people. So we're going to match our people based on a number of different parameters, and we'll cover some of those today in a number of different ways to best fit that workload demand. Right people, right place, right time is the mantra that's been used over the years, but that's what we're trying to achieve. We know how much work there is to do. We know when it needs to be done, theoretically. Now we need to try and match our people as closely as we can to that. We'll start with you, Lucinda. When you get new customers or even some customers that have been on workforce management journeys before, I see them always wanting to start with what we'd know as fully automated scheduling. So you kind of press a button, it churns a load of data and tells you there's the plan. There are different types of scheduling or ways of scheduling, let's call it. I think if we call it manual, template, semi-automated, fully automated. Can you just give us a bit of a flavour of, in your mind, what each one of those does and why they're uniquely different? Maybe start with the fully automated example in my language of you press the button and it churns the data and gives you the answer.
Sure. So yeah, fully automated. What we'd expect is a lot of the scheduling data to be set up in their system, and we're talking about all the employee information, and then the workload engine is used, so the output, the labour demand, and we would expect the system to come up with the results. So it then matches the employees based on their contract hours and a number of other inputs, and it would do a best fit to the labour demand. And the system does that all for them. When we talk about semi-automated, there will be the input from the labour demand and the contracts of the employee. But at this point, we may also have the idea of some perhaps fixed shifts, whether that's the same hours done every week by certain employees, or perhaps they might be on a rotations of earlies and lates. So we've almost forced the system to automate this for us, but it's a bit more fixed rather than allowing the scheduling engine to do it all for them. Then when we talk about template, it's a little bit similar to the fixed shifts. It's more of you can build out a template of what the employees are doing each week, and you simply put that template into a week 1, a week 2 perhaps, and sort of copy it from week to week, whether there's a rotation or not. And then finally, the most simple one, and probably the one that we're hoping to move customers away from, is manual scheduling. One that takes up the most time consuming. This is when there's a lot of editing, a lot of creation of the rotas by hand, a lot of management time needed for this. And they will simply be adding and editing shifts for all employees across the week, and then potentially copying that into the next week and making edits. So that's kind of the different options. And we see retailers aiming for fully automated, but having to be taken on a journey to get there.
Good. So we've got various different flavours, and people can jump in at really any point they want to, but that last point for me is really important. So Matt, if we come to you on this one, customers like the sales cycle or the vision of jumping in at fully automated scheduling. That must take a lot of time and effort, because that's the flavour that requires the most data and good data around colleagues, and Lucinda touched on working patterns and shifts, but also other bits we can touch on around skills, potentially around contract hours and types. So that must be a difficult place to start, right? Fully automated?
Absolutely. It like you said, it takes a ton of data, a ton of time, a ton of testing to really get the automatic schedules where the customer might want them. You have to get all the sales data. If you want to use that sales data for the scheduling, you have to build out that demand that you've talked about previously in other episodes to really tailor that fully auto scheduling. It's a big chunk of work that I think a lot of customers don't realize when they entertain the idea of going fully auto. I know in my experience, once going through that journey that Lucinda talked about, they realize the full picture of what it takes.
And Dana, in your experience, when people want to jump in at fully automated scheduling, do they normally complete that journey and the outputs look great, or do they tend to take a step back and maybe go to template or semi-automated first to get it bedded in?
I think they generally step back because when you're doing automated scheduling, it doesn't just schedule your staff. It also shows you where your staff mix is perhaps incorrect, where you've got too much staff or too little staff, or you don't have enough flexibility in your rules or your regulations or your contracts. And so when they press the button and it throws a schedule out, more than often you have to analyze that schedule to actually come back and see where the problem is before you can get to a point where you can say, all right, we have the right staff mix now, we have the right amount of skills, we're multi-skilled, now we can just press the button because we have the correct mix to generate an auto schedule. So there's pros and cons in auto scheduling, in that you've got to first get your mix right before you can press the button.
Lucinda, do you see that in the UK when you've got clients that want to jump in at fully auto once they understand the data requirements and the change management required? It becomes a bigger journey than they thought, or a different journey?
Yes, absolutely. I would say that it becomes a different journey, and instead of being perhaps an auto scheduling program or project, it gets broken down, and it's what can we achieve in maybe different phases, a phase A, a phase B, and a phase C, always with the aim of auto scheduling and becoming as fully auto scheduled as possible, but recognizing that there's going to be changes within the business and changes within their system that will take a little bit longer. So they will break it down to see what's achievable and what they can roll out in a kind of an appropriate way. We would typically take people from using manual scheduling and template scheduling to a kind of a semi-automated rota, and take that onto fully automated rota when they were ready.
But so clearly there's lots of benefits, and Dana, you touched on some really good ones of fully automated scheduling. I think for me, there's a couple of watch outs. One, fully automated is great, but I think you still need some local user input. I don't think it ever comes out and it's the computer says it's the 100% right answer. There's always that local leadership, fine tweaks potentially. And the other thing I tend to see a lot with fully automated scheduling, and we'll come on to editing schedules in a second, is people get trapped in a loop of the schedule comes out for whatever reasons, maybe reverting to type or legitimate business reasons, they edit the schedule.
Yeah.
but they do it week in, week out. So they almost, it's that classic good data in, good data out. Again, when we're looking at fully automated scheduling, do you guys see different organizations that have good and bad practice in terms of editing and the reason for editing, and if that's a beneficial edit or actually an edit just because we've reverted to type or poor data? I don't know. Matt, maybe we start with you.
Yeah, in my experience, it really just depends on the client. I've worked with some that have multiple stores, hundreds of stores, and it may come down to the store manager themselves. We can kind of tell which managers at specific stores are making less edits, so they might be more trusting of the system and how it's scheduling the employees of that store. And then within the same business, a different store somewhere else, that manager we can see totally undoes the schedule and redoes it. So that's something that definitely comes up. Lots of editing or no editing at all, even within the same business.
Yeah, I'd like to add to that. I think what you experience is the manager that's doing all the editing generally doesn't understand why the system has thrown him out, and he might not be using the system, the scheduling portion correctly, because he's not trusting the system or understanding why it's giving him that mix. So generally it's you do find that with stores, but it's always, when it comes to scheduling, is actually teaching the stores how to actually do the scheduling in the more intelligent method of using scheduling and utilizing and trusting it and knowing why the schedule is thrown out in that manner for you. Most of the time you find they're editing because they have not put the right information in, so the system's not generating the right output.
Well, that's good, because that leads us into kind of information or data that you need. So, Lucinda, if we're moving towards fully automated, or we've decided that's where we're going to start with, what kind of data do organizations need around their people to get some good outputs?
Typically, you would need things like their contracts. So whether that was meeting weekly hours or monthly hours or an average over a period, you'd want to know the employee's availability. Often this is a new amount of data that a business has to collect. So this is around what an employee considers that they're available 8 o'clock in the morning to 8 o'clock at night, but they wouldn't necessarily have a shift for that entire time. But within that, there's flexibility. Then, of course, you'd have time off requests that would be considered in scheduling, as well as any type of other constraints that the business might have, how many weekends that they're allowed to work, how many days in a row, can they work split shifts. So it's lots of employee-specific data, what jobs they work, what skills they might have, all get thrown in and then tried to be matched to the demand.
And it's interesting because certainly the availability bit you mentioned, some of that data will be held in the HR system, so there's an easy way to extract it. But some of it will be new discovery data that you have to sit down with almost every colleague to, one, brief them exactly what you want, and two, then to gather and upkeep that data. So availability, you said. I'm always interested or surprised that some organisations don't ask people when they can work prior to a WFM project. Do you see lots of organisations where people just fall into a custom and practice of hours? So I work 30 hours a week and it's always 9 till 1 on a Monday, 10 till 2 on a Tuesday, 5 till 8 on a Friday. Do you see that a lot?
Yes, I'm going to say that, yes, this is the old way of scheduling, or the original way of scheduling, where it was very static. But to get the best schedule, you often need your people to be flexible, or you need to know their flexibility. So when we talk about availability, it would be that, for example, students are available on the weekend, parents are available during the week, during school times, and this helps you get the best swing of staff for availability, but also to get that availability initially is why it's difficult to just do order scheduling, because clients haven't been using that in the past and now they have to use it. It's something they have to put in. If you don't have availability, you can't schedule.
And when we talk about availability, Dana, there's, I think from a colleague's point of view, it can be quite scary, because it sounds like you might want me to be available every hour of every day, and that's some stuff I just can't do because I've got commitments with family, dropping kids off at school, whatever it might be.
Sorry, I would like to say the difference with that is it's actually better, because if you as an employee work when you prefer to work, you're much happier. And so it's not scary. It's actually quite nice if you use it correctly.
So it's all in the briefing of flexibility doesn't mean I need to be available 24/7. It's about the best balance of when I can work and what the business needs.
Yeah.
So if we come to you, Matt, America's, if I'm right, slightly different in terms of contracts are not as rigid as Europe and the UK. Is that right?
That's correct. And that, generally speaking, that's correct, but it could depend on the state as well. I know states like California and New York have a lot more stricter, basically, employee legislation, when they can work, how much they can work, how long they should be working, and things like that. So generally, yes, I don't think the whole of the U.S. is as strict, but it could depend on where you're at.
So there's an added complexity then if you're a multinational retailer of different legislation across different countries, but in the America example, different legislation within different countries as well?
Exactly, yes. Different states each have their own legislation, some tougher than others. And so, yeah, you could have stores all across the U.S., and if you have a store in California versus Texas or New York versus Colorado, those employees could have to abide by different guidelines, or sorry, not the employees, but the client could have to abide by different guidelines as far as scheduling goes based on the local legislation.
So without a scheduling solution, a workforce management solution, I assume that at times that's quite manual to make sure you're not falling foul of that legislation. So this must be a real benefit if you've got it in a solution that can adhere to those rules or flag when they're not adhered to, I assume.
Absolutely. Yeah, doing it manually can cause some tension, I guess, with that legislation. It's a lot harder to follow, especially if you're a store manager, you have a lot going on just operating a store itself. You're probably not too worried about the legislation and thinking about that. With auto scheduling, all of that is factored into that data and can help maneuver schedules and place schedules that fall in and are compliant with that legislation.
If we think about a place then where we've got our workforce management solution in, we're maybe using semi-automated, heading towards fully automated. Lucinda, what types of benefits do you start to see some of your clients get from that? There must be some kind of tangible ones. There must be some less tangible ones, but also a whole bunch of new data as well that they're provided with.
Yes, of course. Diana touched on some of these, I think, a bit earlier, that sometimes when an auto schedule is produced, the system can actually highlight things to the managers and to the business. For example, whether they've got enough flexibility amongst their employees to cover the hours that are needed for the labour demand, whether they actually have a store or a site that's overcontracted or undercontracted, and therefore that can help them with their recruitment process. If they're overcontracted, they obviously, if somebody leaves the business, they won't need to replace that person. If they're undercontracted, it might be that it guides them as to what type of person to employ. Is it a part-time person? Is it a weekend person? Is it a full-time person? So it can help the recruitment process almost in that sense. It can also highlight to them the advantage of the flexible working with multi-skilling. So it might be that if they've got a very fixed workforce in terms of the area of the site that they can work in, say front of house and back of house, it might actually highlight that instead of recruiting more back of house, that they could cross-skill. You see this typically actually with those that work on the checkout or the cashier. You will have them, they'll work on the shop floor or out the back doing stock, but actually they're multi-skilled to be able to go and help at the tills when it gets busy. So again, multi-skilling in order for their workforce to become placed much more flexible across the store is definitely a benefit as well.
Yeah, so you could use the same people, but actually on different departments or with a different skill set to make them more productive or match where the work is for the people.
Absolutely, yeah.
Dana, have you got anything else to add to that in terms of benefits you've seen from your customers when they move from a more manual approach through to a systematized approach?
And cost.
Yep.
So I think when they do actually find the right swing and they start using the tool for the benefits of what it can do by showing you, it's not just going to schedule your staff, it shows you where you have your pitfalls and your ups and downs, as Lucinda has said, but you can also then measure your costs, and you will find that you can keep within a budget, because now you know who you have available, what their costs are. That kind of information is also, when you get into auto scheduling, the dynamics really of that play up nicely, and you can start seeing good trends happening, and you're able to manage your staff and adjust your schedules in the future and project and look.
And we won't steal the thunder of any future podcast, but there is a whole wealth of apps and mobile functionality that all the solutions offer now, where colleagues can look at their shifts, check their payments and all that kind of stuff. So I know we're talking just about scheduling, but there's a whole bunch of wider benefits from a colleague's point of view, swapping shifts, bidding for shifts, all sorts of fancy stuff that we'll cover. Matt, there must be as well, from a head office point of view, a whole bunch of new insight that's available as well when these solutions start to bed in with good data.
Yes, of course. There's tons of reporting that can come out that will give you insight on, kind of what Lucinda and Dana have talked about. Are people over or under scheduled? Are they meeting their contract hours? Do we have too many people working a specific job that maybe we could multi-skill them to work something else? It gives you coverage graphs. Do we have enough people in the store at peak times during the day? Having all this data really gives you a real insight onto how the store is operating, how the schedules are working, and really kind of where people are placed and are they placed correctly.
I don't know if you see this, Matt, as well in the initial setup stuff, but certainly some of the stuff I've seen over the years in organisations I've worked in, where they start to gather all that people data that Lucinda was talking about. There may be ghost employees, so people on stores payroll that don't exist, that are or aren't getting paid, people that for however long have been working over their contract hours each week, or even worse, under their contract hour each week. So it, for me, almost forces those businesses into some good data cleansing and health checks.
That's 100% correct. I think when you're doing scheduling and automated scheduling, those kind of things and ghost employees are immediately seen, because you're not going to schedule a ghost employee. There's not going to be anybody in that position if you walk around the floor. So you find that eliminates a lot of ghosting, because if you're scheduling correctly. The other point I'd like to make about scheduling, which I find is very useful now, I don't know if Lucinda and Matthew have the same thing, but when you've got this kind of data and information in scheduling, if people go on leave or suddenly phone in sick or anything like that, you can use the scheduling tools like find me somebody to replace this person that has the right skills, that can do the job, that's not going into overtime, that fits the bill, all the criteria needed. It will find that person for you, and it therefore makes scheduling a lot quicker after the effect as well. So should you encounter any anomalies with people being sick or not showing up or suddenly having a promotion, the scheduling tool and having a scheduling tool helps you quickly find a resource to replace somebody who's not there that has the same skills and abilities.
I was just going to say, Dan, I think you're right. I think the whole point of scheduling, as well as some of the business benefits, is actually to empower managers to do their job with creating the schedules. And I think when you've got the labour demand in place, where they can then make decisions of where to move people around, and then they can see the graph update at the bottom, it really empowers them to make a better decision than when they previously were editing without, say, the labour demand underneath. And when they can then see what employees have, what skills, they can choose, or what cost it is to the business, they can better choose people to be allocated to shifts. And ultimately, it's saving them time. They're not creating the rota from scratch. The system has done the best job it can, and then they use their local knowledge of their site, their store, and of their employees and of the geography, and it empowers them to make good decisions for the business.
Yeah, and cost efficiency. I think it's a really important point. Historically, and I mean 10, 15, 20 years ago even, workforce management solutions were all almost seen as the answer. So they'd go in, they'd press a button and people would fight against the output. I think the solutions have absolutely moved on and the understanding of them. But yeah, really, really important point, Lucinda, that you think you've made there around they are a support tool for leaders to get to better decisions quicker in stores, not to replace all of their decision-making ability. And I think that for me is where these projects work really well. They thrive, they're successful, they get to auto-scheduling and it's received well because it's seen as a support and better than what they've got without taking away the local leadership final decision-making. Does that make sense and ring true?
I would say yes, very much so. Your scheduling tool is no longer just generating a spreadsheet that you stick on the wall and tell everybody when they're going to be scheduled. It's now a tool that actually helps you make decisive choices on who you're going to get, how cost effective you are, and how productive you are based on the schedule that you've generated. I don't know about anybody else, but I've also had circumstances where you would generate schedules sort of some in the future just to see, perhaps measure how your future is going to be. And you can use the tool for that kind of thing, where previously you might not have been able to do that.
Yeah, and I think where those businesses have got key peaks, whether that be Christmas or Easter, or if you think about the time that we're recording in now, very strange, very disruptive with the pandemic that's across the world. But actually that'll have a material impact on your labour demand curve, on future schedules. So being able to run those future weeks and play and tweak and do some what if planning, I think it's invaluable, because how would you do it otherwise? Probably with, back to some of the original conversation, manually, pen and paper, but really almost only doing what you've done before, because that's all you know. We'll finish with some final thoughts from each of you, just around top tip for people that are already on a scheduling journey or about to embark on a scheduling workforce management journey. From a purely scheduling component part, if we start with you, Lucinda, have you got any final words of advice for people?
I think it's about how ready is the business for this, assessing where you are already on that. We've talked about the scheduling journey. Where are you on that? Where do you aspire to be? And what are the steps in between that will get you there?
Brilliant. Matt, any wise words from you?
Yeah, I think if somebody wants to embark on the scheduling journey, just to understand the full components of it, make sure you have good data in there, and just embrace it. Like we've talked about, it's a tool meant to help. It's a tool meant to help decision making. It's supposed to help everybody from store managers down to lower level employees. So really just embrace it and let it help you.
And Dana, to finish us off.
Yeah, to finish it off, I would say open your mind, embrace whatever the system is going to teach you, and use it wisely.
Brilliant. So some really wise words there from all three of you. I think one of the key things that we've used repeatedly in this podcast is the word journey. I think it is a journey, and that journey carries on. So even when you get to automated, if that's where you want to get to, there'll be other bits of functionality that come from the various vendors over time, and other bits to improve on. So it should be seen as a journey, but clearly there's some really, really beneficial return on investments at an organizational level, but also at a local store, hotel, wherever it might be in place level, and as well for the colleagues. And we'll touch on what those will be from the mobile point of view in future podcasts. Lucinda, Matt, Dana, it's been an absolute pleasure to catch up with you. I assume you're all on LinkedIn, so if people want to connect with you and find out more, we'll put a reference to you in the notes when this goes out. Thanks very much for your time, and look after yourselves and stay safe.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.